Well, hey guys, what's going on? You just caught me on my way to work here, so I thought it'd be fun to show you what I would bring with me if I were to be working in a professional kitchen again. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so we rely on you guys a lot for video ideas, and we had someone give us a great video idea the other day. Jake will throw the comment up here for you. But essentially what they asked for is a video on what we would bring if we were working in a professional kitchen again. So you ask, and we're here to deliver. We're gonna start by talking about the essential knives that you should have when you're working in a professional kitchen. And I think it's most appropriate to start with the most important knife in anybody's toolkit, which is the gyuto, or the Japanese equivalent to a chef's knife. This particular knife is a beautiful knife, Hatsukokoro Shinkiro 240 millimeter gyuto. We highly recommend the 240 mil size for any professional because it's arguably, if not hard to argue, that this is the most versatile knife you're going to have. It's long enough that you can do slicing tasks with, easily go through larger vegetables, and then once you get the hang of it, you can use it for more intricate stuff as well. Great for breaking down fish, butchering larger pieces of beef, for instance. So an absolute essential for anyone. If you feel the 240 is a little too long for you, the 210 will do just fine, but we highly recommend you give the 240 a try because it's great for so many reasons. Next up, the second most essential knife in your kit is going to be your petty knife. The petty knife is used for all those little things that come up throughout the day, opening vacuum packed bags, butchery, small intricate garnish work. Maybe before you get used to your 240, you prefer to use this for some of the smaller tasks that come up in the kitchen. Brunoise shallot, garlic, chilies, jalapenos. I know a jalapeno is a type of chili, but you know what I'm trying to say here. Petty knife is great for a lot of things and complements your gyuto very well. With these two knives, there's pretty much nothing you can't do in the kitchen, with the exception of maybe cutting up bread, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Third knife that is essential is going to be one of these three. We have bunka, santoku, or nakiri. Now, why do I say one of these three? Well, it's not gonna be super necessary to have all of these or any two of these. Really, all you need is one of these, and it's gonna slot in perfectly between your 240 gyuto and your petty knife. Now, of course, you could do the nakiri gyuto petty, you could do the bunka gyuto petty, whatever fits your fancy. Basically, what you want is sort of like a mid-sized knife that you're gonna use for smaller veg, more intricate tasks. Like I know I said you could use this for brunoise shallot and garlic, but I feel most comfortable using a bunka for shallots and garlic, that sort of thing. So a well-rounded knife kit is gonna have three knives, I think, in it. Of course, there are gonna be some honorable mentions that we'll talk about later as well. But with these three knives, whether it's the petty, santoku, gyuto, or bunka, or nakiri, there's really nothing you can't do. It's also nice to have more than just two knives or even more than one knife because you can spread out the use between all of these knives, which is going to keep your edges lasting longer and means you won't have to sharpen quite as often. Now, of course, you've noticed me taking all of my knives out of my knife roll, which we think is an essential as well. Getting your tools safely from and to work every day is super important. I'll be honest, when I was cooking professionally, I did not have a knife roll, and there were some dicey moments coming off the bus with blades sticking out of my backpack, and I'll be honest, I've sliced myself once or twice with the little pokey throughs. So a knife roll would have been a really good thing for me to have. Also, knife guards are essential. Even with a knife roll that has this nice flap that comes over and protects the blades, there's still a chance that your knife's edges are going to be kind of dinging into one another. So having knife guards for your knives is super handy. Keeps your edges protected, keeps them from getting damaged when you're going to and from work. Now let's talk about how you're going to maintain these most important tools in your knife kit. The first tool you'll need for maintaining your knives is going to be a ceramic honing rod. Now, why do we say ceramic? We say ceramic because it's the most gentle for your knives, much better than the metal ones that come with your German knives. You may have one of these kicking around in your drawer somewhere. chances are it's going to have those ridges in it, which can be really damaging to your knife. Also, very importantly, is that the ceramic material is harder than the steel you're going to be honing, whereas those German honing rods, typically they're going to be at the same Rockwell hardness as your German knives, which is going to be softer than your Japanese steel, which means you're not going to get the greatest results honing with something that is softer than the material you're trying to hone. So ceramic is best for Japanese knives, 100%. You're also going to need a whetstone, and we recommend the 1000 grit whetstone for your first one. The 1000 grit whetstone is sort of like the middle of the road, sort of workhorse stone. I always recommend when people come into the shop asking for their first stone that they go with a 1000. You may need something a little bit lower and you may want something a little bit higher, but starting with the 1000 is definitely the place to go. Assuming you're using your stone to maintain your brand new knives, you shouldn't ever have to go lower than this 1000 grit. And if you go lower, it means you're removing a lot of steel from your knife. So try to keep up on your sharpening and try not to go below the 1000 grit stone. Of course, there's circumstances where you're going to need to, or maybe you have some old knives that you need to bring back to life, but the 1000 is where you should start. Now, how do these differ or how do they work together? So your honing rod is going to be used when you're in the middle of your shift. So, getting your whetstone out, getting it soaked in water and going through the whole sharpening process can be a little bit labor intensive and takes a little bit of time. If you're good at it, it might take you anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. If you're not super comfortable with the whole process, it may take you upwards of an hour. So that's obviously not going to be very efficient if you're in the middle of your shift. And using your honing rod is going to quickly realign your edge and make your knife feel sharp again. Over many times doing that, it's going to cause your knife's edge to just be, totally rolled over. There's gonna be no edge there. And that's when you're going to need your whetstone. So they really are both essential to maintaining your knife's edge. You don't wanna rely too heavily on your honing rod. You should be, if you find that, like anywhere from 7 to 10 strokes on this guy is not bringing your edge back to life, good indication that you need to remove steel, which will necessitate the whetstone. Moving on to some essential hand tools. Now, of course, these aren't going to be the only hand tools that you need, but what we tried to do here was compile a list of hand tools that you may fight over with other cooks in the kitchen, and that would be really handy to have just on your person at all times. And those include a nice peeler. Y peelers are the best in my opinion. So a nice peeler, a microplane for zest and citrus. I know all of the restaurants I've worked in have a microplane, but all the teeth on them are completely flat and they don't zest anything. So having your own microplane is super handy. A dough card or a bench scraper is also super handy. This is going to be great for keeping your station clean, keep you from scraping your knife's edge across the cutting board, make it easy to pick stuff up and move it around. And then of course a Sharpie. This is super essential. You need a Sharpie to write labels and stuff like that. Make sure you're using FIFO correctly, first in, first out, that sort of thing. Now, let's move on to some honorable mentions, some things that would be really nice to have on your person at all times, but might not be essential to your success in the kitchen. This section is also going to include some tools that may be dependent on the style of restaurant that you work in. If you're working in a pub where you're doing like burgers and fries, and I'm sure you're doing great food, but it's not like super fancily plated and stuff like that, you're probably not gonna need a pair of tweezer tongs. They'll probably have them at the restaurant already. But if you work at a fancy restaurant, or maybe you just like to have your own things, a pair of tweezers is gonna be really handy. Great for flipping stuff in your pan, great for plating if you do work at that style of restaurant, good for like getting stuff out of jars and out of containers without getting your fingers all dirty. So a pair of tongs or tweezers is really, really nice to have. A whisk. Now, this is another thing that you probably have a ton of at the restaurant, but I can speak from experience. I worked at a restaurant where everyone was expected to have all of these hand tools. I'll just show everyone everything that we have here. So we've got slotted spoon, spatula, This is also called a spatula, the different type of spatula, pair of shears, and then we also, what else do we have? Oh, the actual receptacle as well is nice to have, and then also a little pocket knife. I brought a sweet little Higo with me to show the pocket knife thing here. So why we say these aren't maybe essential is because, again, the restaurant may have them for you already, but I can speak from experience, having all of these things in a receptacle right on your station really made me super efficient. So if I was making like a gel or something like that for a dish, I had my own whisk here that I could whisk my, I think we use like Ultratex or whatever to make our gels. Lots of different ways to make gels, but usually they involve a lot of whisking. So having a whisk on hand was super handy. And then of course, you've got to get that gel or whatever you were whisking out of the bowl that you were whisking it in. Having a spatula on your station ready to go at an arm's reach away is super handy. Having a slotted spoon on hand for, you know, maybe you've got like some pickled blueberries or whatever, something sitting in a liquid that you need to get out. Having your own slotted spoon is super handy. I remember I used to have a specific amount of spoons on my station because the dishes would change, but not every week, right? So I'd have the correct amount of spoons I needed for each like little piece of mise en place that I had. Having your spatulas and your shears and everything just right there in your bane is super handy. So while they might not be essential, I would highly recommend investing into some of your own hand tools and investing into like a little crock like this that you can keep them all in on your station and accessible at all times. Now, of course, not everyone works at a restaurant like this. You know, I was lucky to work at a restaurant that only did dinner, so I didn't have to worry about anyone stealing my stuff. I had my own station where I could leave everything at the end of the night and be, confident that nothing was going to get stolen or damaged or anything like that. So if you work in a restaurant like that, highly recommend having your own hand tools. Okay, now we're going to go into some honorable mentions here. These are knives that might not be essential to your success in the kitchen, but might also be nice to have. Those being a bread knife and a beater knife. I would say beater knife definitely is nice to have. The reason we put it in the honorable mentions section is because there's probably a beater knife just hanging out in the kitchen somewhere that you work at. So if you need to do anything that you wouldn't trust your Japanese knives for, go and grab that beater knife or have one on your person. Super handy. The bread knife, I always found, I didn't ever really own a bread knife. I always found that there was one in the kitchen somewhere, but I guess I would concede that we've been talking about how the stuff that's hanging out in the kitchen isn't always the nicest. So having your own bread knife probably would be nice, but not essential. We also would not recommend spending a ton of money on a bread knife. This guy's the 10-inch Mercer from, I don't know if Jake got it off of Amazon, but I know you can get them on Amazon. They're like 28 bucks. They'll last you a good 4 or 5 years, and then when they go dull, it becomes the beater bread knife in the kitchen, and you go and buy your own nice one. Look at that.
Circle of life.
Circle of life. The circle of knife. So some other honorable mentions are going to be some other knife shapes that you might like to have. Now, we talked about the petty knife, the gyuto, and then the 3 sort of middle ranged knives that we deemed essential. Some other knives that you might want to have are a hanesuke or a butchery specific knife, a sujihiki or a yanagiba or a slicing specific knife, and maybe like a little paring knife or something like that if you like to work off the board and trim in your hand. Maybe like a little bird's beak tournée knife or something if you're doing like a tournade, like I can't do it, but you know those like potatoes that look like little footballs or whatever. If you're doing that sort of stuff, having a little bird's beak tournée knife would be super handy as well. So there you have it, guys. That's our professional essential kit. What we would bring with us if we were going to work in a professional kitchen again. Let us know if there's anything down below that you would recommend as essential to your success in the kitchen. We'd love to hear from you guys. Let us know if you have any other video ideas. Smash that like button, subscribe to our channel for more knife related content, and until the next one, stay sharp.